I'll say this. Take that, Ben Johnson. Boy, did that feel good. And, I have nothing personally against Ben Johnson. In fact, I've defended him for the most part on here. But, man, coming off of that week one, I'm going to call it a beatdown against Green Bay. Boy, it felt good to go out there and watch the Lions just absolutely clobber Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, and the Chicago Bears. And we are going to talk all about that. Welcome into I'll Say This. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to cover today. Let's jump right into it. But first, before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, at Castellani 2014 on Twitter. We're on TikTok, on YouTube, audio form on Apple Podcasts, audio form on Spotify, and CastellaniContent.com being updated every single day with the content that Austin and I create. Lions videos, Michigan videos, Tiger videos, I'll Say This episodes, Chris Company episodes. It's all archived on there, so check that out. Now, let's get down to the nitty gritty. I could start anywhere. I could start with college, could start with the Tigers, but I'm going to start with the Lions, who put together a virtuoso masterpiece, I would say, of a performance against the Chicago Bears on Sunday. A 52-21 beatdown, a game that was never really in doubt. In fact, I would argue the second the Bears kicked the ball out of bounds on the opening kickoff, you had an idea of where this game was going to go. And, it's an interesting thing because for a season that is only 2 games young, we have seen quite the spectrum here. We have seen the best of the best, which was this most recent Sunday, and we've seen the worst of the worst, which was game number 1. And obviously, when you have what was by definition a disastrous first week, the hot takes are gonna sprout up, and I indulged in that as well. I will say, and I said this in the postgame video, I think for the most part, the concerns that Lions fans had after week 1 were extremely legitimate. And I am going to talk about the Bears game in a second, but just kind of as a post-mortem of that week 1 loss to Green Bay. When I look back at the things that I said, because I try to evaluate and I critique my own critiques, the only thing about week 1 that I should have been more privy to was just how good Green Bay's front 7 is. And this is stuff that you learn the deeper a season goes. It's hard to go off of a 1-game sample size. I came away from the game against Green Bay saying this offensive line is going to take a massive step back. In reality, Detroit was going up against a front 7, especially front 4, that was probably as good and is going to be as good as any in the NFL this year. We saw Green Bay absolutely body Jaden Daniels and the Commanders on Thursday Night Football this week. That unit is going to be one of the best in the NFL. But besides that, whether it was the offensive play calling, the underwhelming performance by Jared Goff, the lack of any sort of running game, the defense or secondary getting torched, there was a lot about after that first game. And any concern that I had, any stress that I had about where this season could be headed was entirely alleviated with what I would call a perfect performance, essentially, on Sunday against Chicago. And it starts with the offense and just the way that this group, and it reminded me of last year and the year before as well, just the way that this group can just hum. I mean, this group, this offense can just purr like a kitten when they are rolling. It is beautiful football to watch. Goff was 23 for 28, but he was essentially perfect, really. I mean, there weren't a lot of forced throws. He was getting the ball into the hands of his playmakers, and that's really, when it comes to quarterback play, I bring this up all the time about how we value these intangibles, the big arm, mobility, all that stuff, and it matters. But the most important thing with any quarterback is what's going on between the ears. And I feel like such a boomer saying that, but you got to be able to read defenses, and you got to know when to check down, and you got to know when to get the ball to your playmakers. And I would argue Jared Goff is such a perfect quarterback for this offense because he knows what he has to do. He doesn't have to do anything spectacular. You have Amon-Ra, you have Waymo, you have Sam Laporta, you have these amazing running backs. Get them the ball in space and let them do their thing. Detroit's game plan offensively was wonderful. They knew that Chicago's secondary couldn't hang with these wideouts. And Amon-Ra was just unstoppable all day. You hit the over-the-top shot to Jamison Williams and what was just a perfect ball from Jared Goff. You got the run game going. Every single box offensively was checked. It was just a masterful performance. And I just want to focus on Amon-Ra for a second because, when you're in the throes of this stuff and you're just kind of going from game to game and you watch a player grow, it's maybe we don't really think about these things in the moment, but this is Amon-Ra's 5th season in the NFL. And of course, the shelf life in the NFL is not super long, right? Not to say that I don't think Amon-Ra can't play another 10 years. I mean, the guy's been in tremendous shape, knock on wood, obviously, but watching what he did on Sunday against Chicago, I said to myself, are we watching one of the best receivers ever? Just because I think that physically, in terms of physical gifts, Amon-Ra is never, it doesn't even come close to a Calvin Johnson or a Randy Moss or a T.O., but the guy catches 110 balls a year. He catches everything you throw to him. He's open every play. He's open every single play. And I'm sorry, the fact that him and Goff came up together, obviously Goff came over from L.A., Amon-Ra drafted by the Lions, but this is going to end up being one of the elite wide receiver quarterback duos of all time. They are going to rank up there with, just in terms of longevity and productivity, they're going to rank up there with Jerry Rice and Steve Young. They're going to rank up there with Marvin Harrison and Peyton Manning. Well, obviously, Travis Kelce's a tight end. It's going to rank up there with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. These elite duos that just, were at their peak, were completely unstoppable. And that's just something I observed because 5 years in, and it's like, this guy's showing no signs of slowing down. Yesterday was as good a game as you can play as a wide receiver in the NFL. The execution all around was just sensational. And defensively, they did exactly what they needed to do. They forced turnovers. Kirby Joseph remains a ball hawk, had an interception. Brian Branch with a big game. Aiden Hutchinson got in on the fun with his first sack. It was a feel-good game, a ton of fun to watch. The only downside, and it's not a downside in terms of performance, but it's just in terms of looking ahead, it doesn't get any easier. You needed this game on Sunday for so many reasons, and it was a must-win that you turned into a tune-up game just because you were kicking so much ass. But next you go to Baltimore, man. And 2 years ago, while it was a much different situation, you went to Baltimore and you got demolished. I don't see that happening. I think this offense is just too good to get to a point where they're getting blown out in a game. But we know how good Baltimore is, and we know how good Lamar Jackson is, and they're going to be up to the challenge. I think even beyond the performance, which was incredible on Sunday, as I brought up at the beginning, stress being alleviated, because I think there was, and it's just a natural instinct for Detroit sports fans to have, for sports fans in general to have. But, I think that a lot of us saw that game on Sunday against Green Bay, the first game, and said to ourselves, is the window closing or is it closed? Are the concerns that we had coming into the year going to be concerns they're going to have throughout the season? Did they hire lame coordinators? Did the offensive line take a massive step back? Is Jared Goff going to regress under new tutelage without Ben Johnson? And what we learned on Sunday against Chicago is that the great, even Super Bowl caliber roster that this team has had over the last 2 years, it still exists. Now, that's not me saying they're going to go 15-2 again. I mean, I for the last calendar year have said there's going to be some regression, but they can still play with and beat the big boys. And guess what? That's the fun about playing in this division. They're going to get another shot at Green Bay too. And they're going to be hungry as they were on Sunday. That was a hungry group of Lions, nothing but praise for what was a tremendous game plan and remarkable execution from Dan Campbell's group. They were not screwing around. They turned that game into a feast and into a party. And those are the kind of games that we've very gratefully become quite familiar with since Dan Campbell became the head coach of the Detroit Lions, and he deserves a ton of credit for that. Baltimore next. We'll see what happens. All right, let's move on to the college ranks here, as Michigan and Michigan State, both against subpar opponents, got wins on Saturday. And I'm probably going to sound like a giant Michigan homer with my breakdown here, but I came away from it feeling significantly better about Michigan than I did Michigan State. Michigan steamrolls Central Michigan 63-3, totally dominant from the beginning. And, it's one of those things that anytime Michigan or any program wins a game like this and you celebrate it, it's met with this skepticism because of the quality of the opponent. Then why play the games? Why play sports? Why do they exist at all? If it's if your mind is made up about how you feel about a certain sporting event. Why watch? Why pay attention? Why don't we all just have our backs turned? I've brought it up before. Last year's tune-up games for Michigan were ugly, and you could tell after Fresno State and Arkansas State that there were issues with that team that extended well beyond the opponent that they were playing that particular week. And we were right. The quarterback play never found any consistency, right? The defense did have trouble getting off the field on third down. That team was a mess. Sometimes what you see in quote-unquote tune-up games or blowout wins can actually tell the full story. And I think what we were looking for after the Oklahoma game was what version of this Michigan team is the real version of them. Is it a team that is going to take a next step this year with an actual legitimate quarterback, raw, right, and young, but a legitimate quarterback? Or is it going to be more of the same with a sloppy, undisciplined group that's going to fumble their way to 4 or 5 losses? And I think if the Central Michigan game was any indicator, it's hard not to come away from that ball game with tremendous confidence and enthusiasm. And I'm burying the lead. It starts with your quarterback. Bryce Underwood was remarkable. And outside of the performance, which speaks for itself, over 200 yards passing, over 100 yards rushing. It's the physical gifts that stand out so much. You guys know how big of a J.J. McCarthy stan I am. As of the time of this recording, he's about to play in Sunday Night Football right now. And I'll always contend I think he's the best quarterback in the history of Michigan football. But I can guarantee you, from just an overall physical standpoint, just makeup, build, arm strength, speed, physicality, Michigan has never had anything like Bryce Underwood. And that much is true. And that doesn't mean that he won't make mistakes. He even had kind of an ugly arm punt on Saturday. But I think that Sharon Moore, going back to his time as the offensive coordinator, and as a player when he was at Oklahoma, takes tremendous pride in winning in the trenches and takes tremendous pride in smash football. That was Michigan's identity in the latter part of the Harbaugh era, and it worked for them. Have a quarterback that's great on third downs, that makes those money plays, but you are going to wear teams down in the trenches. That is how we're going to win. That is our identity. And while I'm not saying that Biff Poggi came in and rewrote the playbook, okay, it's a 1-game sample size, but everything was working offensively on Saturday, 1, because of the caliber of opponent, but 2, because you gave number 19 an opportunity to cook, right? You gave him clean pockets, which, you're playing a much weaker defensive line. Oklahoma's was legitimately elite, but you allowed him to use his legs. You put a ton of faith in your freshman QB, and it's so rare and insane to say this about a guy who just turned 18 years old, but who your starting quarterback is for the next 40 plus games in your program. It is so rare that you can say that about any program. Say, hey, you know what? Stamp it, 3 years. We know who's going to be under center. And that to me means the identity of your program offensively is whatever the hell number 19 wants it to be. And if he wants to do read option, you do it. If he wants to air it out, you do it. And yes, you don't abandon the run game. Justice Haynes with another nice game on Saturday. Jordan Marshall getting in on the action. I mean, they even got down to using the 3rd and 4th stringers, and they were scoring touchdowns. But I think it's very clear through 3 games that the best version of this team is one that unleashes the fully operational Death Star of Bryce Underwood. Now, here's the thing about the Death Star. It got blowed up twice. And I think one of the concerns with Bryce Underwood, similar to JJ when he was a freshman, is fear of turnovers, fear of erratic plays, putting this defense in bad positions. And you know what? If you give Bryce more opportunities to take shots, it probably will lead to more turnovers. Right? There probably will be a fair share of erratic plays. I'm willing to make that trade-off if it means getting the kind of explosive production down the field, vertically, that Michigan got on Saturday. And it's not going to be there every game. Michigan goes to Nebraska next. It's a huge game for Nebraska. It's a big game for Michigan. I think how we feel about both these teams going forward is going to be determined on how they perform in that game. But you saw on Saturday an offense that has the quarterback, and even beyond that, an offense that actually has the weapons. I know that I've had my concerns with the wide receiver room, but Samaj looks legit. McCulley looks legit. You have a good tight end room. There's a lot to work with here. And you do that by utilizing the weapons you have. No longer putting stuff in your back pocket and just trying to wear teams down in the trenches. And I acknowledge you are going to go up against better front fours than Central Michigan. Okay. And it's not always going to be pretty, and there's going to be bumps in the road and mistakes, but you got a Ferrari in your garage. Drive that shit. Don't put him in danger. Don't have him taking, ridiculous hits, but you got to utilize this guy to the best of his abilities. And this is where, I do bring the money and the paycheck into account. You have 12 million reasons to squeeze every single bit of juice out of the proverbial rag that is Bryce Underwood. That sounds kind of weird. And you do it. So I thought it was an excellent performance, and I'm really excited to see what they do against Nebraska, because I think Nebraska is going to be really hungry on Saturday. And they were hungry 2 years ago as well. In Michigan, 49-7. Both these programs in much different places right now, but I was very happy with what I saw on Saturday. Defensively as well, I still think there's some discipline issues to clean up. Offensively, they had 2 touchdowns called back, but forced turnovers. Jayshon Barnum was just a freak, getting to the quarterback. He's a maniac. Really, this was an A to an A+ effort. I'm sorry, I don't care who you're playing. You put up 63. You win by 6. You win by 60 points. You're doing something pretty good. A team that didn't win by 60 points, nice segue, is the Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State won their game against Youngstown State 41-24 in a game that I don't think a ton of Michigan State fans came away from feeling really great about. Now, look, I gave them the benefit of the doubt to a certain extent last week. Boston College, who just lost to an 0-2 Stanford team, all of a sudden that win doesn't look great. But Boston College moved the ball very effectively against Michigan State. And while I did come on here and say that Michigan State's defense needed a lot of cleaning up to do, I also acknowledged it was one of those games where it just became a track meet. And you see that sometimes. You see that with good defenses, where there's just that game. It's like a game in baseball where none of the pitchers pitch well. It's one of those instances where it was going to come down to whoever had the ball last, whatever quarterback had the ball in their hands. Everyone was kind of making plays. No one was getting off the field defensively on third down. It just became kind of your classic college football shootout. And so I was, by definition, going up against a tune-up opponent, interested to see how Michigan State responded. Look, going back to what I said last week, I think Aiden Childs is going to be excellent. And I think already is excellent. Nick Marsh is sensational. And those two alone, with the hookup that they have, are going to keep Michigan State in games and probably even win them a few games just by their ability to hit on big plays consistently, right? They're really good players. They have clearly a very good friendship chemistry with each other. They're going to be able to score points. I'll just be real. I don't think that's a Big Ten defense. That's a deceiving 24 points. Youngstown State moved the ball consistently against MSU. And it was the same issues that have persisted really in the first year plus of Jonathan Smith, which is, poor tackling, not getting off the field on third down, giving up a lot of chunk plays, just like a lot of 15, 20-yard, especially pass plays. I know it's a different Big Ten that we live in now. I understand it with all the new teams, but physicality still plays in this league, and you're going to have to figure out ways to get stops. And based on what I've been seeing right now, and look, who knows? If there's a change, there's a change with Joe Rossi. I'll be the first to acknowledge it. But right now, I'm not seeing a defense that I feel good about putting up a legitimate fight against Michigan State's quality opponents. And their next game at USC, 11 p.m. kickoff, is a quality opponent. That is a game that I think a lot of people circled as a loss before the season. And I think MSU does have enough firepower to stay in that game, but they were giving up chunk plays to Youngstown State, dude. And I think this is going to be the story of really Jonathan Smith's tenure going forward. Hey, you know what? You brought your quarterback with you, and you got a wide receiver one that are going to have a lot of explosive plays. They're going to do their thing, and I think that's awesome. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to stop guys. You got to be able to play complementary football, and I don't know if this is a defense that's going to allow for that right now. If they improve, and I'll point it out. But I think there's some legit issues with their offense, and it speaks to what I said a week ago, which is I don't think this team's very good, but I do think they can be fun. And if you like a lot of points, scoring a lot of points, and giving up a lot of points, then this team is definitely for you. But despite the win, and it was a 17-point win against Youngstown State, I don't want to bury that. I viewed the Boston College game as a thumbs up on the Siskel and Ebert scale. I viewed this game as more of a thumbs down. I think that there's a fair amount to be concerned about on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, gonna end by talking Tigers in this segment, a team that is just driving me absolutely bonkers. A 3-3 week in which they continue to show the Jekyll and Hyde nature that they've showed throughout this season. Look, a 3-3 road trip, you could do a lot worse. Had a phenomenal series against the Yankees in which, look, it was the first time in New York Yankee history that they have lost back-to-back games by 10 runs or more. Right. They just got demolished. Detroit's offense was seeing every reliever they threw out there. It was glorious. You punt the third game on what was basically a bullpen day. Right. And then you come out, you have an uninspired performance against the Marlins. Tarek gets injured. Now, thank God it seems like he's okay. You blow a game, the second game of the series, and you do everything in your power to lose the third game, but you avoid the sweep because you get a great pitching performance. Cater Montero pitching 5 innings of what ultimately ended up being a shutout. The magic number is now 7, and I guess it's only fitting. You got 6 games coming up against Cleveland. And this is, in order to win this thing, you had to go through them. Because until proven otherwise, Cleveland is the defending champs in this division. You have been better than Cleveland all year. You should use this opportunity to beat them down again. But they're scrappy and they're red hot. And weird things happen when you play this opponent. I am disappointed, and Cleveland getting hot has something to do with this, but I'm disappointed by the inconsistent topsy-turvy nature of this team's performance in the second half. There's really no other way for me to put it. I think the offense, while great at points, has shown remarkable inconsistency. Every guy seems to be streaky as hell. We know how weak the pitching staff is, especially the starting staff, once you get past Tarek Skubal. And I do just want to address that really quick. But before I get into it, I'll just say, look, I don't think that this is a great team. I think they've proven that over the 150 games they've played. But I feel like that people are going to take that as me saying they have no chance. Teams that aren't great teams win the World Series. I mean, we've seen 84 win teams make it to the World Series. We saw an 83 win team get to the World Series and beat the Tigers in 2006. Just because you're not a great team, you're not a great roster, doesn't mean that you can't get hot for a month, which is what's going to be required if you want to win in October. And I've seen this team get hot for a month. I've seen them get hot for a whole first half. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. The one thing I will say is Scott Harris, prior to his injury, and this got not Scott Harris's injury, but prior to this injury, hit a home run with the Kyle Finnegan acquisition, right? And Finnegan's going to come back and be fine. Finnegan has been unbelievable, and if they win the division, he deserves, a key chunk of that. I mean, he's come in and stabilized the bullpen late in games. Him and Vest are a legitimate 1-2 punch. Well, that is a great success. I'm sorry, but the Charlie Morton, Chris Paddock 1-2 poop punch of a poo-poo platter that he put together, thinking that those two could bolster this rotation as a deadline at the deadline, is an overwhelming failure. There's no other grade to give it than an F. The fact that you got these two guys with the hopes of, bolstering your rotation, and yet right now I'm feeling better about Troy Melton out of the pen and Cater Montero as a starter than I am either one of those two bozos. That's just a swing and a miss. And I think at some point, Scott Harris is going to have to, and he didn't want it to be this year. Okay, I get it. At some point, you're going to have to make some sacrifices in order to avoid taking on projects. And you've had success with projects, right? At points. This was not a success. Paddock has been awful. I know he's dealt with some personal stuff. You wish him the best. Morton has just been terrible to watch. I mean, the guy just cannot locate a pitch, and you feel like the pitchability is there, but he's not getting count leverage. It's been really painful. You have gotten production lately from a lot of your homegrown guys. Cater Montero, Troy Melton. Well, this guy isn't homegrown. You had 2 pretty clutch, high leverage frames from Tommy Kahnle, and now you got Jose Urquidy back. Making his debut as a Tiger yesterday. So there are pieces to work with, but that's going to be a blight on Scott Harris's resume. It's going to be just because regardless of what happens, you failed to add the depth that you felt like you were adding at the deadline, because these guys are completely unreliable starting pitchers. But the magic number remains 7. Last point I'll make is my whole thing is get into October, win the division, get a top 2 seed. After that, everything resets, in my opinion. I take into account the whole 162. Okay. When this team gets to October, the chance of us seeing the group that we saw in the first 100 games is every bit as likely as the team that we've seen over the last 50, right? I don't think there's any correlation. It's similar to March, right? I don't care how hot you are coming in, how cold you are coming in. Weird things happen. Okay. What I will say is the version of this team that we've gotten post All-Star break, if they play the way that they have, they are not good enough to make a deep run through October. The offense has had its inconsistencies. Guys have fallen off. Glaber hasn't been as good. Z-Mac hasn't been as good. Torque hasn't been as good. The pitching staff, we know what they wear their struggles on their sleeve. That version of them is not good enough. But there's a chance another version emerges. I understand the negativity that I've thrown out there. I get it. And I know that people are frustrated with my negativity, but I'm not counting them out. Saying they're not playing well right now and saying they haven't played well over a certain period of time is not me counting them out. Okay. Go back to it. There's been teams that have won the World Series and have played entire halves of football with their heads up their asses. Anything can happen once you get to October. I just need you to stay stable and figure out a way to get there. And right now you are either any combination of 7 Tiger wins / Guardians losses away from doing something that you haven't done in 11 years. And I hope the next time I talk to you guys on this show, we're talking about an AL Central championship. And if and when they do that, I will give them the praise that they absolutely deserve. It will be worth it. But got to get there, buddy. Got to get there. All right. That'll do it for today's show. Follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. On YouTube, like, subscribe, audio form, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on TikTok as well. And of course, CastellaniContent.com. Castellani.com. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it exists, but it's not my website, damn it. CastellaniContent.com, getting updated every single day with the content that Austin and I create. We have a Kristen Company this week with former Michigan State quarterback Brian Lewerke. Honestly, we recorded it already. Fun episode. Brian's good, and I encourage you guys to listen to that. He's very engaging, had some pretty good stories. A guy that I think we will probably have on at some point again in the future. Not to spoil it, but that's coming on Wednesday. I know I say this a lot and make these like, I don't know if it's a threat, but right now our goal is to give you the best stuff we can possibly give you up until the end of this baseball season. And that's all encompassing. That includes football stuff. That includes Lions. That includes movie reviews, all of it. All of it is in play. After that, we'll reevaluate, but we're in a very good time of year right now, and we're going to continue to take advantage of it. And of course, I'm very grateful to my friend and right-hand man, Austin Sisler, who continues to do a wonderful job. All right, y'all. I will talk to you again here real soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.